for his family over the past year, and his son, who he says is doing better. And that's amen and hallelujah. Please give a warm welcome to Matt Moscona. Matt?
So I'm guessing you don't want me to break down LSU and Wichita State in basketball. I do appreciate the invite to be here. This is one of those days and one of those times where as a radio host you love it for business, but as a radio host you hate it personally, talking about a coaching search, and that's kind of what everybody's talking about right now in our neck of the woods. And I'm happy to answer questions as I've been pretty plugged into LSU's ongoing search for a new coach. I can kind of just catch up on what I know at this point, and then I'm happy to answer questions. I know that the Advocate reported over the weekend that Jimbo Fisher is the #1 guy, and I can tell you that even as we've been sitting here, I've been getting texts and negotiations are ongoing right now with Jimmy Sexton about possibly bringing Jimbo Fisher to LSU. So if you doubt whether or not that's real, it's very much real. But interest and getting a deal done oftentimes are two very, very different realities, and that's what LSU is facing right now. The really interesting thing is that going into this past weekend, I had people at LSU tell me directly that if LSU had beaten Florida, beaten Texas A&M, and gotten to the Sugar Bowl, how could they not have given the job to Ed Orgeron? And that was a very real line of thinking before Saturday's upset loss, where Ed Orgeron was, with the promise of bringing Lane Kiffin in as his offensive coordinator, was, I would put it close to 90% certainty that was going to happen. The Florida loss kind of flipped everything on its head. The Advocate reported over the weekend a list of about 7 names. I'm of the belief that after Jimbo Fisher, the possibility of Tom Herman, I don't know how much I really buy into the other candidates. The names that I hear most frequently are Larry Fedora of North Carolina and Justin Fuente of Virginia Tech. They both have their unique differences and hurdles. Fedora's 54, he's got a very minimal buyout of just over $1 million, but he's never won really big, and would that really satisfy LSU fans? Fuente was basically Tom Herman a year ago when he was at Memphis. He was the hot name that everybody wanted. He ended up at Virginia Tech. He's making $3.2 million, and he's got a $7 million buyout. So LSU would have to pay Les Miles his $10 million buyout, then bite off another $7 million if they wanted to pay Justin Fuente, and then pay him a raise from the $3.2 million that he's making right now at Virginia Tech. I know it's a lot of math involved, but there's one wild card that is out there, and it's an assumption people have that Tom Herman of Houston is going to end up at the University of Texas. And over the last 48 hours or so, I don't know if that's all of a sudden a certainty anymore. And that could leave Texas in somewhat of an odd spot. Now, I'm of the belief that Texas is going to get what Texas wants, because this was a school that was going to pay Nick Saban $10 million to have him leave Alabama. Texas can write a check for whatever size they want to get whoever they want, seemingly. But if Tom Herman, who I've been told might be off-put by some of the politics at Texas and maybe once another year at Houston, if Tom Herman passes on the Texas opportunity, then basically Texas becomes like a desperate poker player with a handful of cash. And they need to go hire a coach and appease their boosters and everyone else. So who do they go after? Who do they target? And how does that muddy the water as it involves LSU and their search for a coach, and possibly even Jimbo Fisher? So it's an odd time, because as a radio host, I'm not very much into the news breaking business. I'm more of let other people break the news and then discuss, have opinions, and try to stimulate conversation about that news that's broken. But it's very difficult whenever you try to decipher what is news, what is credible, what is good information, and it's a balancing act that you have to work through right now. And really the danger is, I say danger not in a literal sense, but in my chair, is if you get something wrong that's of this magnitude, if I were to go on air and miss-hit and announce that someone was going to be the coach and they're not the coach, or get something wrong, people never forget that. They'll never, ever forget that. People very seldom remember who breaks news, but they always remember if you get something wrong. So it's a very delicate tightrope that we have to walk around this time. But as far as the time frame, I do think that LSU will have a coach in place by early next week. I think that every bit of the process has been vetted. They're negotiating right now, and if they strike out on some of their top names, if they beat Texas A&M, they could be prepared to move on Ed Ogeron as quickly as the weekend. So I think they'll beat Texas A&M for whatever that's worth. I think Texas A&M's really struggled, and they're going to be playing a backup quarterback, and LSU's defense has just been marvelous all year. So short week, but if they lost that game, that would, for all intents and purposes, end Ed Ogeron's opportunity to be LSU's head coach. But I'm happy to take any questions if I didn't answer everything already.
Hey, Matt, I enjoy your show a lot, by the way.
Thank you very much.
You did a great job of breaking down Ed Ogeron's record as the LSU's head coach, about how there's only like one team that had a winning conference record that he beat.
Yeah.
So with all that being said, and even if he does beat Texas A&M, it doesn't seem like he's going to be that attracted to another team to be a head coach. So is there chances that he can be retained?
I do think at LSU, he's won 4 games. None of those teams have a winning conference record. Only Arkansas has a winning record overall. There just isn't really a marquee cornerstone win. And the 2 losses, they've combined for 10 points. So it's hard, I think. That's a hard sell to LSU fans that just watch you fire a national championship winning coach and pay him $10 million to go away. I do think Ed Ogeron will have plenty of opportunities to get another head coaching job. What I sincerely don't know is if he's interested in being a head coach anywhere, or if he wants to be the LSU head coach only. But I do think that if he does not get this job, he'll have offers. It's going to be a matter of if he wants to leave and go be a head coach somewhere else.
But you don't think he could be retained as like the defensive line
They'll
coach?
ask.
Head recruiter?
I don't think. I'll say the same thing about Ed Ogeron as I would about Dave Aranda. People say, well, whoever comes in, they have to make sure they keep Dave Aranda. Nobody's firing Dave Aranda. I mean, he's under contract through 2018, and his defense has allowed 11 touchdowns all season. I mean, any coach who was hired at LSU should get on bended knee in front of Dave Aranda and grovel and beg him not to leave anywhere. When Dave Aranda leaves LSU, it'll be to be a head coach somewhere. So I think Dave Aranda's back next year. The issue with Ed Ogeron, I think any coach would love to have Ed Ogeron, who's probably the best defensive line coach in the country and is maybe the best recruiter in the country. But if history is any indicator, when he didn't get the USC job, I mean, it was December 2nd and he resigned. He didn't even stick around to coach the bowl game. So I don't know that Coach O would stick around under a new coach. That's just a guess, though. Yes, sir?
Okay. Ed Ogeron doesn't get a pass for losing those 2 games, but Jimbo Fisher gets a pass for getting blown out at Louisville and losing at home to North Carolina.
I'm with you. And just so you know, it's a don't shoot the messenger instance. I'm not the one making the decision.
I understand, but I hear it all the time.
Right. What I would say is when you look at if you looked at a blind resume, there is no comparison. Jimbo Fisher, 75 and 17, 76 and 17 through 6+ seasons. He's won a national title, 3 conference titles. This guy got E.J. Manuel, Christian Ponder, and Jamarcus Russell drafted in the first round. And if you look at LSU over the past decade, what is the single biggest problem in LSU football over the past decade? Quarterback. We can all say it, quarterback. They can't recruit and develop a quarterback, which is stunning. This guy has done it for his whole career. So if everything else is status quo, you have great defense, you keep recruiting, you're in the SEC, and you bring in a guy that can develop, coach, and recruit quarterbacks, I understand the train of thought where you say, man, this is the deficiency, you plug that gap, what's stopping us now, right? So I think that's kind of the feeling of the administrators right now. Anybody else?
Unless you say you think they could get an answer from finding out of Herman or Fisher by the end of this week. They don't have to wait.
Weekend.
By
next week, by the beginning of next week.
Yeah.
So games, the LSU plays Thursday, of course. Games will be played Friday and then Saturday. Florida plays Florida State Saturday night. If it's Jimbo, I would think that because they're out of the college football playoff mix, Florida State is. So the candidates at LSU's vetting, none of them are waiting on college football playoff rankings to see where their postseason destination is. and there's a recruiting dead period which begins December the 12th. So if you're LSU, you want your new guy in place so we can start making headway with recruits before it goes dark on December the 12th. So they're not looking to waste any time at all.
You think Les will be coaching someone next year?
I do, stunningly, I do. It's kind of one of those instances where the perception outside of your house is greater than it is inside of your house. And I think LSU fans have become very disenchanted with Les, but something that you hear over and over and over outside of Baton Rouge is, how could you get rid of this guy who's won a championship? They run through the resume, not noting the slow deterioration over the last 3 or 4 seasons. But yeah, I think Les, if he wants to coach, there will be opportunities for him to coach.
Which means we don't have to pay his buyout.
Right, Les Miles' buyout will be reduced by the equivalent amount of the contract he signed. So Les Miles' $10 million buyout, let's say he signs a 4-year deal at $2 million per, his buyout will be reduced by $8 million. Anybody else? Great, thank you for having me.
Thank you, Matt.